Hello there, everyone. I've got a couple of my Nintendo 64 controllers here. These are official Nintendo branded ones that I've had for a few years. And obviously, as you can tell, over time, typically the joysticks on these get really worn out to the point where they develop this chalky material on the inside, and they get a little bit rougher to handle. And I mean, in general, obviously, the design I don't think was extremely durable in the first place. As you can see, all extra play there is here when I just let go of the control stick. There's all this extra room that isn't used by the player for extra precision and whatnot. So I figured I would get a couple of replacement joysticks since I've taken these controllers apart before, and wanted to show you guys quickly how to do that. This is the second time I will ever be doing this, so hopefully it will be a relatively smooth process. But these are replacement joysticks, but there's something different about them. As you can tell, there's a plastic insert here, and I believe it uses a bearing like the GameCube controller. So these are much easier to move around, and not only that, they don't develop that chalk-like material, I don't believe, on the inside, and hopefully they will last much longer, and they will also be easier to use over long periods of time because of this design. As you can tell, they use a little multi-pin plug here that plugs into the same port as the standard N64 joystick port. I believe there's an extra lead on the front as well, where the normal controller uses, I believe, only 5 of the 6 leads here. This one uses all 6, so we'll be getting a little bit of an upgrade there. I don't know exactly what for, but we'll probably figure that out eventually. But I'm going to go ahead and get started with this red controller over here. On the rear, thankfully we are in the era of Nintendo where they were still using all Phillips head screws, as you can see back here. There are 6 on the sides, there's a single one in the middle, and then there's 2 up near where the memory pack or rumble pack slot is up here. And those are slightly smaller, but they're still Phillips head screws. So you're going to need to take all of those out in order to remove the top shell from this controller. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And all you really need is this Phillips head screwdriver for most of this process. Sometimes having a flathead will be helpful as well for removing some of the buttons from their frames and whatnot. But also note that this is a great opportunity if you're taking apart your controller to clean the inside. There are plenty of tutorials about that, so I won't go deep into that, but I will just show you what the controller looks inside. So let's go ahead and get started. There we go. Now this should hopefully come apart much easier. There we go. So as you can see, the front raises off just like that with no pressure at all. Maybe a little bit from the top towards where the cable is there. And the Z button should stay in place. If it falls out, that's okay. It's relatively easy to insert. So if you can keep all of the screws in there, that's fantastic. And you can just set it off to the side. You guys kind of know what that looks like, so I don't have to keep it all in frame. But so this is the design of the inside of the Nintendo 64 controller. Obviously, you have the main circuit board where all the main buttons are connected up here. You'll see that more signature, I think, green color on the other side from what I remember. And this is the joystick assembly right here. And covered right here is, I believe, that's the Z button assembly. And here's the plug we'll be plugging the joystick assembly into. So obviously, since this is just the second time I've only been doing this, I don't know the exact circuitry and the throughput and whatnot, but I will do my best to try to show you the easiest way to take this apart. I believe to start, we want to get these 3 Phillips head screws here near the center of the joystick assembly that are surrounding it. And this one, I believe, does also assist in getting the entire assembly out. So I'll start with these 3, and we'll see how much play there is once I get those out. Now, just make sure you set those 3 screws off to the side like I have there. And it looks like this assembly should pull out relatively easily. Now there's a ribbon here in the way, so I'm going to try to move that out of the way before I pop this off completely. So the Z button assembly does need to come off separately. You see these here. These are little clips on the side of the joystick assembly. You can just pull one out like so, and that'll give enough room for the Z button assembly to come apart. But note that the rubber pad here is loose, so be careful with it when you take it out, unless you want it to, go flying off somewhere. And I'm hoping that won't be lost in time forever. So here we go. The joystick assembly comes out relatively easily in one piece. You can take this apart to clean it out if you were choosing not to replace the joystick, but just to kind of clean it out and whatnot. I believe the clips are up here. You can pry those open to get this gray portion to come out, along with this screw holding the inside of the joystick assembly together. So once that comes apart, you should be able to clean it relatively easy, but we're completely replacing it. So the only other thing that's attaching it to this controller is that multi-lead port right there. So I'm going to go ahead and attempt to detach that. I believe this is where you'll probably want to use a flathead to be, delicate with the connector to make sure you don't damage it because it's plastic. Speaking of flatheads, I'm going to go get one. Okay. Confirming that the pulling out method is actually the easiest method, as it is with many other things in life. So it looks like all 6 leads are here, but it's not necessarily that matters. So here's our replacement assembly. Before we stick it in, we want to make sure that they look relatively identical, which they do. I believe these come from Two Brothers Video Game Industries, I believe is the name of the manufacturer that distributes this. I got this one off Amazon, and it's pretty great. If you the packaging is relatively simple, just comes in this little guy, and there's the part number if they maintain that across the entire model, and it looks like that. And these come at around $10 a piece, but I would think that they're totally worth it given the design and whatnot if you're looking to play your Nintendo 64 for a long time. So it almost looks like there's no screw on the top of this assembly here, but I don't think it matters because it looks like this is staying together the way it is, at least from what I can tell. But everything else looks relatively similar. It looks like this may have a little bit of extra bulk. Hopefully that won't affect when we put it into the controller, but other than that, it looks pretty much identical. So we will go ahead and try to stick this in and just see if it works, right? And obviously, insertion is the same as removal. You want to be careful with these L and R buttons over here. Those tend to pop out pretty easily, and when they do, they're not the easiest thing in the world to get back. So we want to insert this into the controller and line up the 3 bolts there. And make sure that we insert the connector the correct direction. And there we go. Make sure it goes in nice and snug like that, and it's also even. And then we want to take the Z button assembly and hopefully clip it in the way it was before. And make sure you even out the padding there. Make sure it's nice and flat. And then I will go ahead and reinsert the small Phillips head screws into these 3 locations. Now, just to be extra careful, just verify, kind of feel this out before you put the cover on the other side. Make sure that the gray outside portion of the joystick is flush with the front of the body of the controller. You can kind of feel around it like that, and obviously make sure the joystick is still moving as intended. And there you go. That is basically the replacement procedure. I'm going to stick the bottom back on the controller and make sure the Z button still fits in place. Please note that make sure that this controller cable is still wrapped around in this fashion. That keeps someone from unintentionally tugging on the cord and having the cord break on the inside of the controller, which would not be cool. It's a great design that Nintendo, I think, has implemented in almost all of their wired controllers. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and put that back on and see what it looks like. So not the entire backside is tight. You want to turn it around, and already that looks a lot better. And just make sure that it looks like the motion of the control stick is still normal. Make sure all your buttons function like they used to. Make sure the feedback, which obviously there's not much on the N64 controller, but make sure they're all relatively similar to what they used to be. And then all you got to do is plug it up and make sure it works. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any other things that I may have missed, or things in your experience with doing this kind of repair that I may not have covered, feel free to comment below. And I'll see you guys later.